I'm sorry. I was just waving to a student who just walked in. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to Bravo Music Academy. I am Miss Christy. We're here for our Teacher Tip Tuesday live broadcast. You might see some cars going by. I'm in a different room today where we're having new students sign up, so I got kicked out of my old room, but that's okay because this room is nice and cozy and I love it in here. So welcome everyone. I hope you're having an awesome day. I hope you're all ready for Halloween tomorrow. We are not having any lessons, but we are open for trick-or-treaters. So if you're in the area and you want to stop by, come visit us from 2 to 6. We'll be here with some treats and some games and some fun activities for you all. But today we are going to get into our memorization for our Whiz-Bang recital series. Our recital is just over 2 weeks away. It's the middle of November, so we've got a little bit of time, but memorization is kind of the next step for learning and performing your piece. Now, I will tell you, I don't require all of my students to memorize their pieces. Not all of our teachers here do either. There are some places that do require that. There are some situations where you really won't have a choice and you will have to memorize your piece. So I have some tips for you today to make that easier. And I got to pull up my little helper here. I'm going digital today with everything, so bear with me just one moment. Okay. So let's dive right in, and I'm gonna cover two separate aspects of memorization. The first are the benefits to memorizing, and then the second is how to memorize. The how to memorize can be very complex if you want it to be, but I'm gonna give you 3 really easy tips to help with that. So first off, why memorize? I can remember middle school, high school, and college. As a pianist, you are required to memorize your music for every performance that you give in college, at least. So in high school, my piano teacher knew that, and she required me to memorize everything for every performance that I had with her. And I'm grateful for that. But not every child is going for their degree in music ed and piano, so I don't require that from everybody. If a student wants to or can, they do. So what memorizing does is it helps create mastery through repetition. When you're memorizing something, you're playing it a whole lot more than anything else that you're working on or working towards. And that repetition really builds mastery in skill, not just in that one particular piece, but also in your technique, in your note reading, in your score study. All of that gets built up to that next level of mastery with the repetition that comes with memorizing. The second thing that is a great benefit to memorizing is that it frees up your brain power. You're not thinking about what note comes next, what finger am I supposed to use, how am I going to reach that octave if I miss that finger. You're not going to miss that fingering because you have memorized it. You know where you're supposed to go. So you can think about other things. You can think about how to express a story through the song that you're playing. You can think about how to express an emotion or a feeling within the piece, and using artistic expression, really sing out the piece no matter what instrument you're playing. The third thing is that it will give you confidence in your performance. Now, I've heard people argue the other way, where if they don't have the music in front of them, it makes them more nervous. And I get that. But if you truly have it memorized, then you know it. So why not have the confidence in your abilities, right? Those are my three reasons why memorization is good. So now let's get into the nitty gritty a little bit more and talk about how to memorize. There are a few schools of thought in the best way to memorize. Some people do say just repetition over and over and over and over and over. Other people say, take it hands separate and memorize just the one hand and then memorize the other hand if you're playing piano. If you're playing another instrument, they might say, memorize the rhythms and memorize the notes. For me, and for my students, I have found these three things are really the most helpful to quick and easy memorization of pieces. The first is chunking it. And what I mean by chunking it is I mean take it in sections. Last week I talked about little bites. And little bites are, just as a little refresher here, it's one measure plus one note. I actually don't have any music in here today. I'm in a room I'm not normally in, so I don't have anything to show you. I'm sorry. But it's one measure plus one note. When you chunk it, you're taking a larger section. So if you're performing a large masterwork, say a sonata or even a sonatina, you have your form. You have your A section, you have your B section, sometimes you'll have a C section, you'll have your bridge, you'll have your verse, your chorus if you're a singer, right? You will have all of those different sections that you can break down, and then you chunk it and you work on that one section and work towards memorization of that one section. Now, one tip that I do give my students when they're doing chunking is to have the music in front of them, but don't look at it. Either memorize where your fingers are supposed to go. I'm playing the piano on the table right here in front of me, and I realize you can't see me do that, so I'll do that up here. So looking at your fingers and memorizing where they're supposed to go. I know. The first thought is, but I was told not to look at my fingers when I'm playing. Yes, that is absolutely true. When you are learning a piece of music, your eyes need to be on the music so you know what you're doing. But when you're going to memorize, you're not going to have the music in front of you to look at. So you do have to train your eyes to not look at the music and be able to look somewhere else. So I have students look at their fingers and memorize where they're going on the keys. I also have my students look at the cover of the book, and they just close the book, they look at the cover as they're playing, and they're just imagining the page in front of them and what they're doing. So that's tip number one, is chunk it. Work it in those sections and get them really good and in your fingers or in your voice or in your embouchure, whatever your instrument happens to be. Tip number two is to listen to it. Now, I discourage my students from listening prematurely. If you listen to somebody perform a piece and they're performing it incorrectly, you could develop a bad habit, you could learn it incorrectly, and then you're kind of sunk because then you have to unlearn and relearn, and that's even harder than just learning the first time. But once you already know a piece and you know what it should feel like, what it should sound like, you should definitely go and find recordings of other people performing that piece. I love YouTube. It's great. It's really, really great, especially because it shows people performing pieces who haven't been alive for decades. I love going and finding Vladimir Horowitz and listening to his interpretations of pieces, and then going and finding somebody else and comparing the two performances to see what is my style. How am I going to perform this piece? How am I going to make it my own? And then putting that into my memorization strategy and remembering what it sounds like and then turning that into what it feels like. So when you're going to listen, do make sure that you're finding reputable musicians and not just someone who's in their basement making a video just because. Make sure that they know what they're doing. And you can always check with your teacher to see if it's a good video or if it's something that you should maybe be using to say, okay, yeah, this is not what I'm going to be doing. All right, my third and final tip for memorization week is blind memory. I surprise people sometimes. because I can play a lot of things with my eyes closed. And the only reason I can do that is because I have done blind memory. Memory, very simply, is playing without looking and without knowing what your instrument feels like. That makes it very hard. So start out really simple. For pianists, I would recommend a simple 5-finger scale. Da 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 da. Do it with your right hand, do it with your left hand, and then get the feeling for each interval. For me, I know when I spread my hand just like this, that's an octave. That is exactly an octave. It doesn't matter where I put my hand down, that is an octave right there. A fifth is that. Now I have little hands, so somebody who is an adult taking lessons, you might put your hand like that, and that's an octave. That all depends. But getting that blind memory, that tactile and kinesthetic memory, that is gold for piece memorization. Knowing where you're going, what it feels like without having to stare at absolutely everything that you're doing and think about it. If you're playing guitar or ukulele or something, you don't have to stare down at both hands and go back and forth. You can just relax and look and smile at your audience as you're performing this piece. All right, folks, that's it. We had 3 tips on either side. 3 tips why memorization is great and 3 tips for helping. So let's do a really quick recap of that. The first reason why it's awesome is because repetition. Repetition creates mastery. Simple. 2, it frees up brain power so you can be more musical and artistic in your performance of your piece. And the third is it gives you confidence. You know what you're doing. Trust yourself. You got this. And then the 3 tips for how to memorize. The first is to chunk it. The second is to listen to it. And the third is blind memory. Play it with those eyes closed. You could even look straight up in the air if you need to. That way you're not tempted to peek just a tiny little bit, right? All right, folks, that's it. I hope you have an awesome day. Enjoy the rest of your evening. If you're here on the East Coast with me, it's starting to get pretty dark. Actually, it probably is totally dark out by now. If you're out on the West Coast, it's probably starting to get there. So enjoy the rest of your evening, and we will see you next Tuesday right here for another Teacher Tip Tuesday Live. Bye.